you and your target audience might not be the same. So just because you think a book looks really amazing and beautiful, it doesn't matter if it's not reaching your target audience. The book will fall flat. Mm-hmm. You need to know who you're trying to reach and how do you translate that to them.
Kind of like when we were talking about colors, you shouldn't really let your personal preference get in the way of doing what's right as far as your brand strategy goes to reach the people you're trying to reach.
Absolutely. Because if you do, you're likely going to miss something. Hey, I'm Stephanie Feger, and Empower is my middle name. Well, not really, but it should be. I believe that empowered people empower people, and I'm obsessed with empowering you, the nonfiction author, with impactful marketing strategies to help you take your important message and share it with those who desperately need it, want it, and will buy it. I'm a gal whose life was changed by a dream. Literally. And that dream pushed me to write my first book, the book that changed everything for me. That dream was the catalyst to help me capture a message I was passionate about. And in turn, it gifted me with the opportunity to merge my two loves, my skill set for marketing, PR, and communications, and my love for books, both writing them and marketing them. As the owner and chief strategist of the Empower PR Group, I help nonfiction authors with laser-focused strategy and tactics to help them write books that sell, promote their books to those who need and want them most, and build a meaningful business from a message that is empowering. Think of this as your one-stop shop for marketing insights from an author who has been there, done that, and understands exactly where you are. So, grab a warm beverage and a comfy blanket, and get your pens ready because I'm ready to empower you on all things author branding. This is the Empowered Author Podcast. You've probably heard of the word brand and know that you likely need one. But where do you start? What does that mean for you, the aspiring or established author? And how is that different from your book brand? All of this might make your head start to spin, and if it does, take a deep breath and rest easy because I've got you covered. In this season of the Empowered Author Podcast, it is all about author branding, and I'm joined by Madeline Copperwaite, my talented graphic designer and brand expert who knows branding like the back of her hand. Together, we're excited to empower you with everything you need to ensure you are telling your story the way you want your story told. And I'm talking about your brand story today. Hey, Madeline. Welcome back to the Empowered Author Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be back.
For the last episode of this season. A whole season dedicated to author branding. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe that we've gotten so much accomplished.
Yeah. Seems like a lot to cram into just one season.
I know. And I've realized that this concept of podcasting was something that I'm doing. So I feel kind of silly saying this, but I really like it because I think instead of just a one-off, we're really giving people the opportunity to dig deep and understand different elements of different things that they know are important to them and how to be creative when they think about it.
Yeah, it's like a deeper dive, but not to where it should be overwhelming.
Because, people laugh at me because I always say, we're just going to do small digestible chunks. And I don't want to think about digestible chunks, but think about it like baby food. We're spoon feeding you something that you can absorb at a moment and then add and layer on along the way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of exciting. So it's also been exciting to me because I've also been really intrigued in just branding in general. But this season has allowed us to really dive into how your brain works and understand the creative and strategic direction that branding goes down. So it's been really enlightening to me as well as empowering to those that are listening. So, I just thank you for being willing to share all of that.
Yeah, thank you for having me and, give me a platform to share that and to help other people along with you.
Absolutely. When you get two creative, excited people together, so many good things can come out of it. So this has been so much fun. So today's topic is really, really intentional. In fact, I bet for most people when they found out that this season is all about author branding, they probably thought we were going to start where we're actually ending. So the last several episodes have taken authors and authorpreneurs through that journey of really developing an author brand. And if you picked up on it, we very, very rarely, if any, discussed how a book is interconnected into that and how the author brand and the book brand come together. That's what today's episode is. So instead of starting there, we're ending there because we want to make sure that you always start with your author brand first. Because quite frankly, an author is bigger than a book. And I say that as the woman who helps people market books. You are bigger than your book. Now, your book will outlive you. Your book will be your legacy. Your book has extensions that you don't have the capacity to do. You can't talk to the number of people one-on-one like your book can give that. But there's so much more to what you bring to the table. And I want you to start with understanding that first. So you have to start with understanding your vision, your goals, and how does that book align within that versus the other way around, versus how you fit and align within your book's vision and goals. So I typically kind of like to reflect on a couple of questions, and I'll pose those for our listeners to think about. But what if an author plans to write other books? So if you've built an entire brand that is in alignment with one book, what happens if you write others that aren't connected? Like, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. What if the author plans to write other books that actually have competing target audiences and goals? So it's not just that you write other books, but those books don't align at all and they actually have completely different audiences.
Mm-hmm. Since you're bigger than your books may be, separate parts of you. They may be different things that you know about and different things that you want to reach people with. So that's another reason why, your book brand is separate to your author brand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then even to go farther, what if the author plans to do more with their message? They offer other products or services or offerings, right? Like if you just align with your book brand only, you might be missing a big opportunity. Now, there are times where that makes sense, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But in general, it's really important to always start with the strategy as an author to figure out where you want to go and how you want to get there. So they can connect. And honestly, in some ways they should connect, but don't let that be your starting place. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. So the book brand is like a part of your author brand, but it shouldn't be all consuming and all encompassing.
Yeah, absolutely. So a book brand, what in the world is a book brand? That's a great question. And I always, I giggle because I say, get over the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. But the reality is that people do. That the cover is kind of the essence of your book brand. And quite frankly, it's the essence just in life, right? Like look at Instagram, look at Facebook, and people are judging us based on the cover that we put out, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why many people put out this picture perfect kind of filtered world when in reality, there's so much more to it. But we are judged by our covers, by our brands. So if we know that, if we know the psyche behind how people look at us and engage with us, we got to use it to our benefit. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to judge us, make sure that they judge us and do it in a way that it's going to allow us to stand out in a cluttered world. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is crazy out there.
Yeah, that book brand is going to be the very first thing that people see. When a book is on a shelf, what are they going to see first? They're going to see that book spine, what you choose to put there, what type of branding you go with. It's all going to affect, both how people perceive your book and how often they would notice it or what kind of people it's going to attract.
Okay, so Madeline and I are recording this episode here in my home office where I have a whole kind of stack of books, my favorite books behind me. And I knew we were going to talk on this, so I pulled out a book by one of my favorite authors. Do you know who Jodi Picoult is?
I hadn't heard of her before.
I am introducing Madeline to lots of authors. Jodi Picoult's my favorite. Her and Mitch Albom, we'll talk about him in a little bit. But Jodi Picoult writes about really interesting topics that are timely and relevant and allows you to see all different perspectives. That's right. We talked about her in a previous episode, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want you to look at this Jodi Picoult book next to my book. So the Jodi Picoult book that we have here right now, for those who might be, who might have access to take a peek at it. It's called A Spark of Light. It's a beautiful cover, like full of pinks and yellows and blues and purples. And I picked it up because it reminded me of my book cover, Color Today Pretty, and just kind of this watercolor splotchy component. Now, my book is focused on finding balance and perspective in life, being really introspective and living a colorful life. Her book's about abortion. I had no idea. And the whole controversy around such a politically charged and emotionally charged conversation. But I judged the book by its cover. I did not read the back cover of it. And I bought the book. And I start reading it and I'm like, this is uncomfortable to me. I made it all the way through the book and I'm a better person because of it. Because now I have not that it's changed how I view the topic, but it has inspired me to just look at life from different angles. I judged her book by the cover. And because of her author brand, I knew that I would walk away a better person from it. And so it's proof that you want a book cover that is going to inspire the right people to read it. And that's pivotal.
That's kind of interesting too, using her as an example, because you didn't necessarily know what the book was actually about. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an interesting spin on, a brand usually wants to draw people in because, they know that brand aligns with their values. But in this case, it's almost a little bit the opposite. Mm-hmm. It's not giving you the full story. So you don't really know what the book is exactly about until you pick it up and open it.
But because of the vibe of the book, I got excited about it. Now that I go back after I've read it and I look, you can see all of the different faces. Do you see that? Did you notice that at first?
I did.
I didn't. I just saw all these colors. But there's at least 5 or 6 different faces in it. And how she wrote this book was from the perspective of 5 or 6 different people. Mm-hmm. But I didn't connect the dots. So I actually think that's another beautiful thing about branding in general is when a brand tells you something or draws you in, but later you go back and look at it and then you get even more information about it. That's even cooler.
Yeah, because now you know what the brand is actually about and you can see the intention behind it.
Absolutely. So in the cluttered world, I was drawn to her cover. Mm-hmm. And because I was drawn to her cover, I read a book that I probably would have been a bit hesitant to read. Not for any other reason except that topic just makes me uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Like I just wouldn't spend my pleasure time of life reading about something like that. But I'm so glad I did now. And that book was probably one of the coolest written books I've ever heard of and I've ever read. So it's just proof. People judge you. They judge your books by the cover. They judge your brand by the cover. And figuring out how the world judges you can impact how you present to yourself, how you present yourself digitally, how you present yourself in the visual format and branding and all of that stuff. So knowing that that's happening, use it to your advantage. And perception is reality. So how things look impact how we perceive them and our willingness to engage in them.
Absolutely. Because the visual is the first thing we experience. So it's going to really affect, again, like it says, our willingness to engage with them.
You might be the perfect solution to somebody's problem, but they look at your stuff and they are not drawn to it and they're not even going to give you the time of the day.
Yeah. Human beings are very visual and often they do judge, by both their first impression, which the first impression of a book is the cover.
Yep.
And so they'll judge by what they see.
Yeah. So when we were talking about the author brand, the same steps that we talked about apply to a book brand too. So colors, fonts, imagery, all of that plays into these feelings and emotion and a promise that you're going to get out of that. Mm-hmm. What kind of font do you use? Do you use consistent font? So maybe your books, like Jodi Picoult's a good example. I have 10 of her books. Every book is different. Every topic is different. But every book has the same font use. Mm-hmm. So that's the thread that is interwoven to connect it all. Mm-hmm. Knowing all of that and thinking about all of that and collaborating with a graphic designer, if you're self-publishing or working directly with a publisher, it's important to keep in mind the same things we talked about with author branding. What is your goal? Are you trying to elicit someone in a business, from a professional sense to get something out of your book? What do you want them to feel? Make sure that your cover and even the font that's used within your book connects to it.
Yeah, even like the layout within the pages, maybe
Yeah.
how you do the titles, if you have like a rule that you use throughout it, if there's like how you do the page numbers, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And again, a reason why you want to collaborate with someone who knows this and loves to do this, because you're not going to think about that typically if you're trying to do this all on your own.
Mm-hmm. And even if if you do think about it, you may not know really, what your target audience is looking for in a book, what's going to draw in the people that your message is for.
Absolutely. So when you're building your book brand, you need to think of a couple things. First of all, you need to know your goals. And that's very similar to building your author brand. What are your goals? Who are you trying to reach? And how do you want them to feel? That is so important to deciding what your book cover and the inside of the book matter looks like. And it's really helping you build that overarching kind of brand. It'll entice the right people to pick up your book and to read it. And it will give you extensions to be able to promote your book too in different platforms. So remember, this is so important. I have to remind myself this all the time. You and your target audience might not be the same. So just because you think a book looks really amazing and beautiful, it doesn't matter if it's not reaching your target audience. The book will fall flat. Mm-hmm. You need to know who you're trying to reach and how do you translate that to them.
Kind of like when we were talking about the episode about colors. You shouldn't really let your personal preference get in the way of doing what's right as far as your brand strategy goes to reach the people you're trying to reach.
Absolutely. Because if you do, you're likely going to miss something. The last thing about kind of the building your book brand that I want to touch base on is realizing that the brand identity can also dictate design. So, for example, it can dictate how your social media world looks. So, I really think Instagram's a great platform for a lot of book marketing because it's really visual and it can bring the written word into a feeling through visual elements. And your book cover and brand can easily be translated into beautiful social graphics that you can incorporate author quotes or testimonials or key elements within the book and kind of use that to bring it to life. So the book brand, your book cover, all of that stuff is really, really pivotal. So when you're promoting your book, this can be interesting. Are you promoting your book or your author brand or both? This is the $1 million question. And the answer, in my opinion, is really, it depends. It's subjective and it depends on what the opportunity is, the listeners and the audience of where you're promoting. So, and it also depends on what you as an author, what your long-term goals are. So I'll use me as an example. Color Today Pretty is the first book that I wrote. My second book is also Color Today Pretty derivative. And Color Today Pretty is if you've not checked it out, you should. You can get it on Amazon. But the book is really built upon a dream that I had. And the phrase Color Today Pretty has meaning in how I see the world. I have the Color Today Pretty brand. I have a Color Today Pretty social platforms that align with that. And I promote that because Color Today Pretty is a brand. It is a way of life, a way to think about things. But when I'm talking about the professional speaking that I do around the Color Today Pretty message, I'm really using my Stephanie Feger brand to do that. Because I also know that Color Today Pretty is one of many forms of inspiration or many aspects of Stephanie. If I only focused on Color Today Pretty, people might not think of using me as a marketing expert to come speak to a conference. So don't limit yourself is what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah. It's kind of situational. Depends on, what your goals are. If you're marketing, just your book or if you're, marketing yourself along with your book.
Yeah. So I pulled out a couple of other books of some authors that I thought we could use because I think what happens here is how you promote yourself can kind of go two ways. One is you have a book brand that aligns with your author brand and one that has a book brand that doesn't align with your author brand. So the first one I want to touch on is Mitch Albom. I've already mentioned this, I think in a previous episode, but I know you and I have talked about it and I'm like, you need to go. I'm very much a brand loyalist to a couple of authors and Mitch is one of them. But if you were to go to Mitch Albom's website, you would notice that his brand is so interconnected with his books, from
even the block format that he has on the book cover, to the types of fonts that he uses. This is a very simple kind of book cover design, but all of his books have the same kind of look and feel, even though they have different topics. But when I go to his website, when I understand and think about Mitch, I realize that the books align with his brand. And his brand name is really that interconnecting piece. All of it just feels unified. You can even see this here. We'll take off the cover and you just look at the different books. You've got different colors, but you can tell even from the size of his books, this is a unique book size. Mm-hmm. The types of paper that he uses typically has texture to it. All of that is a part of his brand and what he wants you to feel.
I always love thinking about, like printed pieces, how just the paper, the paper weight, the thickness, the texture, the color, it all plays a part of that brand, and the design and how you choose to do that reflects that.
It's exciting. And I, like I told you before, he has another book coming out. I already know I'm going to get it. I already know it's going to be this smaller sized book. And I smell books. Do you smell books?
Occasionally.
Like, it just gets you in the mood. But see,
it's that library smell.
I know. I should have been a librarian. Maybe I was in a different life.
That's what I wanted to be when I was growing up.
Really?
Yes.
Well, how cool is it that that you didn't do that, but now you partner and help authors?
I changed it around. First, it was like ballerina, princess, librarian.
So yours were better than mine. Mine was the Kroger bag lady.
Really?
Yes. And then it was a vet.
Okay.
And then it was an actress. And then it was just go to school and figure it out. And that's when I found PR marketing.
I can't get over the Kroger bag.
I really wanted to. I wanted to grow up. And for those who aren't in the area where we live, I don't know if there's Kroger's everywhere, but it's like a grocery store chain. I really wanted to do it. And then in our area, I don't know if you ever went to it, but there was a store called Biggs that you could actually bag your own groceries, kind of like at Trader Joe's now where you do that. I was in heaven. I didn't get paid to bag, but I bagged my groceries, and my mom always laughed at me, but I was like, this is so much fun. Yeah. So here's you out there, wanting to be a librarian, and my hopes and dreams looked a little different, but it was still fun.
Yeah. To each their own.
To each their own. Absolutely. And not that there's anything against bagging groceries. No. I think it's pretty freaking awesome.
Sounds relaxing.
I think one day I'll go back to that. We'll have fun there one day. One day we'll get there. Okay, so we just talked about Mitch Albom as kind of a book brand that aligns with their author brand. Another author I want to use as an example, I want to use her as a book brand that doesn't align with an author brand directly. So Joanna Penn, I got the pleasure of meeting her in person at a conference. She is a really, really awesome author. I have not read any of her fiction books, but I feel like that's kind of what she's known for, is this sci-fi fantasy, action-packed, and I say sci-fi, it might just be action-packed fantasy type books, fiction books. And in that arena, all of her fiction books have this similar kind of look and feel. It reminds me of like a Dan Brown book or a Dean Koontz book or something that's kind of got this high energy. But her name for that is, I think it's JF Penn or J Penn. She doesn't use her full name. But she also has a whole nonfiction series of books where she helps authors kind of navigate the book process. And that's where she goes by Joanna Penn. And it's very interesting because when you look at her website, neither of those align. Outside of, she uses a very similar serif font that connects the piece. So I found that, what she's done is, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, each genre has a brand identity.
Yeah. And that's definitely the way to do it.
Yes. So it's okay to be different. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that she also did to separate that is how she refers to herself. So in the nonfiction, she's Joanna Penn. And the other, it's just her first initial, maybe her middle, and her last name. So, and then her business is called The Creative Penn. So she's actually, her author brand is The Creative Penn, Penn, because that's her last name. How brilliant. And that's what she uses for her podcasts and her email marketing and all of her workshops. So I would say her brand's a bit more complicated because of all of those different layers, but I love the consistency that she's created in the two genres.
Yeah, that's great. You kind of start with your brand, and then, your brand as an author, your business. And then you kind of allow your brand to like influence it, but not maybe necessarily be exactly the same. You have, like unique sub brands for the two different types of writing that you're doing.
Absolutely. And so then that way people know when they love your fiction work, they know, like Jodi Picoult, I see it, I know it, I'm always going to know that that's her stuff. Or Joanna's nonfiction work, I get excited because all of her books, their nonfiction covers have a very similar vibe to it. You're building that brand equity and that consistency, but all through the same lens of making sure that it makes sense.
Yeah. And with her two different, like, book series, you might call them. In one aspect, she's kind of like, her brand of the fiction books is her, her selling her writing. And then this other with the nonfiction is kind of like teaching people how to write. She's selling her and her writing experience. So it's kind of two different avenues.
And if you were to look at the Creative Pen, which is what she kind of considers her brand and her business, it really lends more to the nonfiction side because nonfiction books, and hers specifically, align with what her business is. She just so happens to also have a massive series of fantasy action books too. It's very interesting. She's a really great resource for authors. So if anybody is looking for another resource, I really like Joanna. Actually, I should probably share a photo. I have a selfie with her. I kind of felt like I was a celebrity at that moment. It was really cool. But I think when we look at this, the key takeaway I kind of walk away with is that this really goes back to, how does the author see themselves? Does the author see themselves in alignment with the books that they write, or larger, or have a different kind of component to themselves than the books that they write? And I think that dictates the type of brand that you're building. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. It is situational. It kind of depends on, again, what your goals are, what your values are, who you're trying to reach, and the best way to get your message to them for what you're trying to do.
Yep. So the Empower PR group helps authors that are aspiring authors who are writers, authors who are on the verge of launching a book, and authors who have built businesses based on their book's message, sell books that are marketable, promote the books and their businesses to those who need them, want them, and will buy them, and build meaningful businesses based on empowering messages. I share all of that to say it was really, really purposeful why we structured season 2 of the Empower Author podcast the way we did, because from a marketing standpoint, an author brand gives you so much more to run with than merely the book brand. Selling a book is important. However, typically most authors realize that when they launch a book, especially a nonfiction book, that they are actually creating a business and they have so much more of what they want to do with the messages found within it. So today's discussion was really fun, talking about how the book brand translates, but don't forget how important the author brand is. So this was a lot of fun, Madeline. We made it. We did 6 episodes. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and the opportunity to discuss and share with all these authors. I think it's really helpful what we both offered. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
It was so much fun. I can't imagine doing it with anybody else. And let me just share with everybody listening, finding a great graphic designer that understands branding. Actually, I consider you a branding expert, is really important as you start to figure out how do you develop your brand, and how do you bring it to life. So I'm so glad we got to spend some time inside Madeline's creative mind, and I can't wait for her or someone else in your community to help you create your author brand and make it big and impactful and strategic. Remember, I don't believe in movement without strategy, and I always, always, always go back to author branding first and foremost.
As we wrap up Season 2 of the Empowered Author Podcast, where we focus on all things author branding, I want to leave you with a few questions to ponder. Pull out a piece of paper, a notebook, pull up a note section in your phone, and reflect for a minute on these questions. What are your goals as an author? What do you want your book to do for you? And how is that a part of you as an author? Do you see yourself as your book, or your book as an extension of you? Who are you trying to reach with your book and with your derivative offerings? How do you want people to feel when they engage with you? Remember, people judge a book by its cover. How do you want to be experienced? Think you are ready for an author brand now? Or maybe you already have one that you are realizing may not help you accomplish the goals you seek or inspire the people that you want to engage with. Branding is strategic, it's methodical, and it is full of purpose. It can be what helps you get from here to there, from your vision to your deliverables, from seeing a problem to becoming a solution. If you are a nonfiction author who is interested in creating an author brand or refreshing your current one, the Empower PR Group can help. I invite you to visit www.empowerprgroup.com/author branding for more information on how Madeline and myself can help you bring your brand to life. We have various package offerings that can support you where you are and how you need us. And we have a freebie just for you. Download our Branding Brainstorm Guide, which will help you be able to articulate your vision for your brand, your book, and your business so that you are ready to work with a team to bring it to life. And if we can be that team for you, we'd love to. We are ready to empower you in the creation of your author brand. Are you ready? Remember, empowered people empower people. I have empowered you. Now, with your brand in hand, it's your turn to empower others.